Okay, I want you to just imagine an object for a second. It's sitting on a reinforced table right in front of you.
Mm.
It's 36 inches tall. That's 3 feet.
Right.
20 inches wide. And it's almost 9 inches thick. I mean, just to open the cover, you'd have to really engage your shoulder muscles.
And you would not want to pick it up alone.
You would absolutely injure yourself because this single book, this one volume, weighs 75 kilograms.
Which is, what, 165 pounds?
165 pounds.
To put that in perspective for you, that's the weight of a washing machine. Or, a very large adult human being, all compressed into wood and leather and parchment.
Exactly. It takes 2 librarians just to lift it safely.
Yeah.
We are, of course, talking about the Codex Gigas.
The giant book?
Yeah, technically the name just means giant book, which is, accurate but a little bit dry.
A bit of an understatement, yeah.
Most of the world knows it by a much more evocative title, the Devil's Bible.
And that name, the Devil's Bible, it does a huge amount of work, doesn't it? It immediately frames the object as something forbidden, something occult.
Dangerous.
Yeah, dangerous. It suggests it's a grimoire, used by some sort of cult. But the reality of this artifact is actually so much more interesting. It's a tragedy, it's a scientific marvel, and a historical travelogue all wrapped into one impossible object.
And that really is the mission for this deep dive. We aren't just looking at some spooky prop for a ghost story.
Right.
We're looking at the largest surviving medieval manuscript in the entire world. And the question isn't just what is it, but how? How does this thing even exist? Because when you really look at the logistics of creating this in the 13th century, the money, the time, the sheer amount of biological material required, it feels physically impossible.
It creates a real cognitive dissonance. You see the object, but your brain just struggles to compute the labor behind it. It's, as some have said, a library in one book.
But a library that was seemingly built by a ghost.
Yeah.
So let's start with that physical reality, because that is where the impossibility really begins. You mentioned the weight, but let's talk about the material. This isn't paper.
No, absolutely not. This is vellum. And not just any vellum. We're talking high-grade animal skin.
So what does that mean exactly, vellum?
Well, vellum is animal skin, usually from a calf or a sheep or a goat that has been through this incredibly long process. It's soaked in lime, scraped of all hair and flesh, and then stretched super tight on a frame to dry under tension.
So it's a huge amount of work just for one page.
An incredible amount of labor just to make one single sheet. And the Codex Gigas originally contained 320 leaves.
320.
So when you calculate the size of these pages, and remember, we're talking 3 feet tall, you are looking at basically one animal skin for every 2-page spread. One animal, one bifolium.
So if you do the math on that, that's a herd of 160 animals.
160. Donkeys or calves, most likely, slaughtered specifically for this one single project.
That's a staggering economic investment, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. In the early 13th century, in the Kingdom of Bohemia, your livestock was your wealth. It was your food, it was your farm labor, it was leather for shoes. To cull 160 animals for a book, it's like a modern corporation liquidating a whole fleet of luxury cars just to buy the paper for its annual report.
It's an immense concentration of resources.
It is. And this brings us to the first major contradiction of the whole story. The book came from the Benedictine monastery of Podlasis, and by all historical accounts, Podlasis was not a wealthy powerhouse.
It was a small, relatively poor community.
Exactly. It was insignificant, really. It didn't have a massive scriptorium or some wealthy patron pouring gold into his coffers. So how does a poor backwater monastery afford the raw materials for the most luxurious manuscript in all of Central Europe?
Well, this is where history sort of fades out and the legend begins.
Yeah.
And honestly, the legend is the only thing that makes any sense to the human mind when you're faced with an impossible task like this. The story goes that this wasn't a team effort. It was the work of one man under the most extreme duress imaginable.
The legend of Herman the Recluse, or in the Latin, Hermanus Inclusus.
Right. So the story is set around the year 1229. We have this monk, Herman, who has committed a grave sin.
And the sources are always a bit vague on the specifics, aren't they?
Very vague. But it was a breach of his monastic vows so severe that the abbot decided on the ultimate punishment.
Which, depending on which version of the legend you read, was either being walled up alive or being starved to death. But walled up is the one that really persists.
That's just a terrifying concept, immurement. They place you in a little niche or a small room, and the masons just build a brick wall in front of you, brick by brick, until that last little stream of light is cut off.
And you're just left there. in the dark to dehydrate and die. It's as much psychological torture as it is physical.
Exactly. And so, in the face of this terror, Herman tries to bargain. He pleads with the abbot, and he makes this proposal that appeals to the monastery's pride.
He sees an angle.
He does. He says, if you spare my life, I will create a book that contains all earthly and divine knowledge. I will write a book that will bring eternal glory to this monastery forever.
A book to glorify God and, not incidentally, put the humble monastery of Paleography on the map.
Exactly. And the abbot, maybe sensing an opportunity or maybe just amused by the sheer desperation of it, he agrees. But there's a catch.
Of course. The catch is the deadline. Herman promises to finish this monumental life's work in a single night.
Which, as we've just established with the animal skins and all that, is physically impossible. You couldn't even prepare the vellum for a book this size in one night, let alone write it.
Not even close. But he agrees. He's dumped in a cell, the sun goes down, he dips his quill, and naturally by about midnight he realizes the futility of his bargain.
He's barely written the opening lines.
Right, and the sheer weight of his mortality just crashes down on him. He knows he's going to die in that wall.
And this is the pivot point in the story. A pious monk would pray to God for a miracle. He'd ask for strength, or maybe acceptance of his fate.
But Herman does the opposite.
He does. He realizes God isn't going to help him break the laws of physics. So he prays to the one entity that defies God.
He invokes Lucifer. He offers a trade, his immortal soul in exchange for the completion of the book before sunrise.
And the devil, ever the opportunist, accepts. The legend says the devil either took the pen himself or maybe guided Herman's hand, and the text flowed onto the parchment at this supernatural speed. By morning, the book was finished.
The monastery was glorified, Herman's life was spared, but his soul was forfeit.
A classic Faustian bargain.
It is, and it even predates the more famous Faust legend. But what's so fascinating is why this legend exists in the first place. It's not just a spooky campfire story, it's an explanation. When people in later centuries looked at the Codex, they saw something that just didn't make sense.
You mean the uniformity of it all?
Exactly that. When you look at other medieval manuscripts of this size, they are almost always collaborative efforts. You'd have a scriptorium. Scribe A does the morning shift. Scribe B takes over in the afternoon. Scribe C does the headings. And you can see the changes.
You can see different handwriting styles.
Different handwriting, yeah. The ductus, or the flow of the pen, changes. You can see where the ink density is different because a new batch was mixed. You see the human element?
But the Codex Gigas is different.
It's uncanny. The handwriting is incredibly consistent. From the first page of the Old Testament to the final pages of the Chronicle of Bohemia, it looks like it was written by the same hand, in the same mood, with the same rhythm.
Which brings us to the science. Because we don't have to just guess anymore. We have paleography. Specifically, the work of Michael Gullick, a renowned paleographer who analyzed the Codex extensively. So what did his forensic analysis tell us?
Well, Gullick's analysis confirmed the impossible part of the legend while completely debunking the supernatural part. He confirmed that, yes, the entire manuscript was written by one single person.
One person wrote a book that weighs as much as a refrigerator.
One person. He looked for all the little tells, the specific letter forms, how the scribe makes G-A or an F. He looked at the angle of the quill, and it's identical throughout. There is zero variation that would suggest a second scribe ever took over.
And then even more startling, there's no degradation in the handwriting over time, is there?
And that's the part that really baffles people. Usually, over the course of a project this long, you see aging. You'd expect to see a tremor develop in the hand. You'd see signs of illness or fatigue. This script is eerily perfect.
It looks like it was written in a single breath.
It does. And that's why the one-night legend feels so plausible when you look at it. It lacks the messy biological reality of a human aging over decades.
But we know it wasn't one night. The National Library of Sweden did the math on this. If we strip away the devil, what is the actual real-world timeline?
It is grueling to even think about. So if you assume a scribe can work for 6 hours a day, which is probably generous given the lighting conditions and the physical strain, and they work 6 days a week.
Okay.
Just copying the text would take about 5 years, nonstop.
5 years of just writing.
Just writing the words. But that doesn't include any of the prep work. Before you write a single word, you have to rule the lines on every single page. You have to take a sharp point and score the vellum so your text is straight. That alone takes hours and hours.
And mixing the ink, sharpening the quill.
constantly sharpening the quill. And then there are all the decorations, the intricate initials, the illuminations, the big illustrations.
So what's a realistic estimate?
Realistically, when you factor in the time for prayer, for eating, for sleeping, and all the other monastic duties, you are looking at a timeline of 20 to 30 years.
30 years.
A minimum of 20, probably closer to 30.
So let that sink in. A man enters his cell in his 20s, young and full of energy. He finishes the project in his 50s, likely physically broken, with failing eyesight.
It completely reframes the name Hermanus Recluse, doesn't it? It probably wasn't a punishment where he was walled up by others. It was a voluntary reclusion.
He was a recluse.
Yes, in the medieval tradition, an anchorite, or recluse, would sometimes voluntarily be walled into a cell that was attached to a church to pray and work for the rest of their lives.
So he walled himself up. The book was his cell.
Precisely. It was a life sentence of his own making. And the mental and physical discipline required to maintain that level of consistency over 3 decades. I mean, that's harder for me to wrap my head around than the idea of a demon doing it in a single night.
It's a feat of human endurance that really borders on obsession.
It does.
And speaking of demons, we have to talk about the elephant, or maybe the Prince of Darkness in the room. Page 577. The reason this book gets its nickname.
The famous portrait.
It is so startling. I mean, you're flipping through this holy book, you're reading the Bible, and then suddenly, taking up an entire page, almost 20 inches tall, is the devil.
It's the largest surviving portrait of the devil from the Middle Ages. And visually, it's just fascinating. He's depicted completely alone, crouching against this empty white background.
Can you describe him for us? Because this isn't the sort of red tights and pitchfork devil we see in cartoons.
No, not at all. First of all, his face is green. In medieval iconography, green was often associated with decay, with envy, with poison.
Okay.
He has 2 horns, small red eyes, and these sharp talons on his hands and feet. But I think the most disturbing detail is the tongue.
It's red and it's forked.
And there are 2 of them. He has these double red tongues darting out of his mouth. It's a very literal visual representation of dishonesty, of being double-tongued like the serpent.
Right.
But there is another detail that a lot of modern viewers kind of laugh at, but it's actually incredibly serious in its context. He's wearing what looks like a white loincloth with little black tails on it.
Okay, I have to say it. It looks like a diaper. It just does. It looks like he's wearing an ermine diaper.
It really does to the modern eye. I get it. But in the 13th century, that pattern, that white fur with the little black tips, was unmistakable. That is ermine.
Ermine. The fur of royalty.
Exactly. Kings wore ermine. Queens wore ermine. By dressing the devil in an ermine loincloth, the artist is explicitly identifying him as the Prince of Darkness.
Ah, so it's a status symbol.
It is. It creates this perverse mockery of earthly royalty. He is a king, but he's the king of a corrupted, fallen kingdom.
He's all alone on the page. That's rare, isn't it? I mean, usually in medieval art, you see the devil getting stabbed by St. Michael or dragging sinners into a hellmouth.
Correct. Usually the devil is part of a narrative, part of an action scene where he is frankly losing. Here, he is static. He's just there. He is presented without a conqueror in the frame. And that's what makes him so unsettling. He feels present. He feels like a direct address to the viewer.
But if this is a holy book, a Bible that was intended to glorify God, why give the devil a centerfold? Why give him such prominence?
To understand that, you absolutely cannot look at page 577 in isolation. You have to look at the page that's facing it, page 576.
And what's on that page?
A full-page illustration of the heavenly city, the New Jerusalem. It depicts these tiered buildings, red and blue towers, all geometric perfection. It represents order, salvation, and God's final promise to mankind.
So when the book is open, you have the heavenly city on your left and the devil on your right.
Exactly. It's a deliberate juxtaposition. It's a visual representation of the ultimate dualism, good and evil, order and chaos, salvation and damnation.
It's a choice.
It is a choice. The scribe isn't glorifying the devil. He's presenting the choice in the most stark terms possible. He's saying to the reader, here are your 2 options. Here are your 2 possible destinations. Choose wisely.
It's a binary system laid out on the page.
It is. And notice the layout, too. The heavenly city is empty of people. It's architectural. It's abstract. The devil is a figure, a personality. It contrasts the eternal, perfect structure of heaven with the specific crouching threat of the enemy. It's really a theological diagram, not a satanic tribute.
That makes the Devil's Bible nickname feel a bit unfair, doesn't it? It's more like the Bible of the Great Choice.
It is, but I suppose Devil's Bible sells more tickets to the museum.
True enough. But the Codex Gigas isn't just a Bible. And this is the part that really blows my mind. The Gigas, or giant part of the name, refers to its physical size, but it could just as easily refer to its scope. You called it a library in one book. What did our scribe actually pack into this thing?
He attempted something that was incredibly ambitious for the time. He tried to compile a complete summary of all human knowledge, both divine and secular, into a single volume. Imagine if you had to print out the internet, but you could only choose, say, the 10 most important websites.
So obviously it starts with the Bible.
Yes, the full Old and New Testaments in the Latin Vulgate translation. That's the foundation. But then he immediately adds history. He includes two massive works by the first-century historian Flavius Josephus, The Antiquities of the Jews and The War of the Jews.
Why Josephus? I mean, he was a Jewish historian. Why is that so essential for a Christian monk in 13th century Bohemia?
Because for the medieval Christian scholar, you couldn't fully understand the New Testament without understanding the historical and cultural world it was born into. Josephus provides the context for the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, the history of the Jewish people up to that point. It connects the Bible to what they considered real, documented history.
Okay, so we have religion and we have history. What else is in there?
Encyclopedia. He includes the Etymologiae by Isidore of Seville.
Oh, I love Isidore. He's the guy who tried to explain the origin of every single word, but he got a lot of things hilariously wrong.
He did. He was writing back in the 7th century, trying desperately to save all of classical knowledge from disappearing after the fall of Rome. His etymology covers everything: grammar, math, God, angels, monsters, geography, stones, animals.
Right, isn't that where you find those weird medieval facts, like the idea that beavers bite off their own testicles to escape from hunters?
That's the one. It was a common belief. The idea was that hunters wanted the beaver's glands for medicine, so the beaver would self-castrate to survive. Isidore put that in his encyclopedia, and so our scribe, Herman, dutifully copied it down into the Codex Gigas.
So this massive holy book contains the entire Bible, the history of the Jewish people, and helpful facts about beaver castration.
And medicine. This is a crucial section. There's a collection of texts known as the Ars Medicinae, or the Art of Medicine. It contains foundational texts attributed to Hippocrates and Galen, all filtered through the great medical school at Salerno and translated by Constantine the African.
So this would have been the most up-to-date medical textbook of its time.
Absolutely. It was practical. Monasteries were often the primary source of medical care for their entire district. Having these texts meant the codex wasn't just for spiritual reading. It was a reference manual for keeping the monks and the local villagers alive. It deals with the four humors, bloodletting, herbal remedies, diagnosis.
And finally, he brought it all home. Literally.
Yes. The last major text is the Chronicle of Bohemia by Cosmas of Prague. This is the first real history of the Czech people. And by including this right next to the Bible and Josephus and Isidore, the scribe was making a massive political and cultural statement.
He was putting his own local national history on the same level as sacred history.
Exactly. He was saying the story of Bohemia is part of the grand story of God's creation. It elevates the local to the universal.
It really is a great work. It's an attempt to organize the entire universe between two wooden boards. But, and here's where it gets a little spicy, there's some things in there that don't quite fit that holy library vibe.
The spells, sins, and scribbles section, as you might call it.
Yes. Let's talk about the magic. Because for a devout Benedictine monk, there are some very strange incantations written in this book.
We have to remember that the line between prayer, medicine, and magic in the 13th century was much, much blurrier than it is for us today. They are all, in a sense, attempts to intervene in the physical world using powerful words.
But, I mean, some of these are straight-up spells. There's a spell for how to catch a thief.
Experimentum de futto, yes. It involves a whole ritual to identify who stole something from you. Which, if you think about the incredible value of the codex itself, kind of makes sense. It's an insurance policy written directly into the book.
And then there's the fever spell. This is the one that really caught my attention. It reads like an exorcism.
It is essentially an exorcism of an illness. The text addresses the fever as if it's a personified entity. It commands it. And it names a specific demon believed to be responsible.
Dino.
Yes, the text adjures a demon named Dino.
Which sounds like the name of a family pet, but the description is horrifying.
It describes this Dino as having 150 claws. The spell says, and I'm paraphrasing the Latin here, I adjure you, Dino, you who have 150 claws, who drink blood and eat flesh, sleep now.
Sleep now. It's treating the fever like a rabid beast that you need to sedate.
It's deeply anthropological. By naming the demon, the monk gains power over it. It isn't just, I have a high temperature. It is, I am under attack by this entity, Dino, and I know his name, and I can command him. It turns the passive experience of being sick into an active spiritual battle that can be won with the right words.
That's fascinating. And right next to these spells for the body, we have a list that's just as intense, but for the soul, the concession of sins.
This is a massive list of sins, written in very large letters, appearing right before that big 2-page spread of heaven and hell, and it is comprehensive.
When you say comprehensive, what are we talking about here?
It covers all the standard ones, of course, pride, envy, gluttony, but it goes into specific graphic detail: lust, fornication, bestiality, self-pollution. It lists variations of sexual acts and violent thoughts. It is unflinching.
So is this Herman confessing? Is this the scribe airing his own dirty laundry? Because if it is, he had a very active imagination for a recluse.
That's the big debate.
Yeah.
Some people romanticize it and say, this is it. This is the sin he was being walled up for. These are his crimes. But most scholars view it as a pastoral tool. It's what's known as a confessional mirror.
A checklist.
Exactly. A monk would read this list to examine his own conscience. By listing the absolute worst possible sins, even ones the monk had likely never committed or even thought of, it forces a total and complete introspection. It breaks down the ego. It makes you realize that as a fallen human being, you are capable of anything.
It gets you in the right headspace. You read the sins, you realize your own fallen state, and then you turn the page and see the devil in the heavenly city. The choice becomes immediate and very, very personal.
Precisely. It's a carefully curated spiritual journey. The spells are there to protect the body, the confession is there to cleanse the soul, and the final images present the ultimate destination.
Now, we've been talking a lot about what is in the book, but we also have to talk about what isn't. There's a gap.
Yes.
The book originally had 320 leaves. Today, it is 310. 10 leaves, so 20 pages were cut out at some point.
And they weren't just torn out accidentally, they were deliberately excised with a sharp blade.
And naturally, when pages go missing from a book called The Devil's Bible, the conspiracy theories go wild. I heard people say it contained the devil's prayer, or maybe a recipe for the apocalypse, or a list of high-ranking demons that was just too dangerous for human eyes.
It's the Area 51 of medieval manuscripts, the idea that the truth was removed by some secret society to protect us. But the reality is almost certainly about something much more mundane: bureaucracy and monastic rules.
Explain that. How does bureaucracy lead to someone cutting up a priceless masterpiece?
Well, we have to look at the history of the manuscript's ownership. Podleshis, the monastery where it was made, went bankrupt. They fell into such debt they couldn't afford to keep their greatest treasure. So in the year 1295, they pawned it.
They pawned the Devil's Bible.
They pawned it to another monastery in a town called Sedlec. Now, here is the key detail. Podleshis was a Benedictine monastery. Sedlec was Cistercian. These are different monastic orders with different rules and different constitutions.
So it's like selling a playbook from an NFL team to a professional rugby team. Some of it is useful, but the core rules are different.
That's a great analogy. Most scholars agree that the missing pages contain the Rule of St. Benedict, which is the foundational constitution of the Benedictine order. When the book was transferred to the Cistercians, the Benedictine rule was no longer relevant to the new owners.
So they might have just cut it out to update the book for their own use.
That's one theory. Or, and I find this possibility more poignant, the Benedictine monks might have cut it out themselves before handing the book over. They were losing their masterpiece, their identity, the work of their brother Herman. Maybe they kept the rule as a final keepsake.
Wow, we have to sell the car, but I'm keeping the steering wheel.
In a way, yes. It explains the missing pages perfectly without needing any secret demon prayers. But that sale in 1295 was just the beginning of this book's journey. This codex was about to go on a tour of Europe that makes a rock band look lazy.
Goes from Podleshis to Sedlec. Then it's bought by the Brevanov Monastery in Prague. And then it catches the eye of the ultimate collector.
Emperor Rudolph II, the Holy Roman Emperor.
We have to take a minute for Rudolph. He is a whole deep dive all by himself.
He really is. He reigned in the late 16th century, and his court in Prague was the center of the world for science and strangeness. He was this melancholic, eccentric, brilliant man who was obsessed with the occult, with alchemy, with the marvelous. He collected alleged dragon bones, two-headed calves, magical stones, and he heard about the Devil's Bible.
So he decides he has to have it for his collection.
He needs it. He asks the monks at Brevnov to lend it to him. He just wants to study it, of course. The monks, likely terrified of saying no to the most powerful man in Europe, send it to Prague Castle.
And Rudolph, true to form,
never returns it. It becomes the crown jewel of his Kunstkammer, his cabinet of curiosities.
So it sits there in Prague Castle, surrounded by alchemists like John Dee and astronomers like Tycho Brahe. But then comes 1648, the end of the 30 Years' War.
The war that devastated Central Europe. In the final days of the conflict, the Swedish army besieged and captured Prague. And they weren't just looking for territory, they had a shopping list.
A shopping list.
Yes. Queen Christina of Sweden had heard all about Rudolph's legendary collection, and she wanted it. She specifically ordered her generals to seize the art and the library.
So it was a targeted heist.
The biggest art heist in history up to that point. The Swedish troops stormed the castle and systematically looted the library. They took the Codex Gigas as war booty. They loaded this 165-pound book onto a wagon and hauled it across war-torn Europe all the way north to Stockholm.
So the Devil's Bible becomes a prisoner of war.
And a prize. It was placed in the Swedish Royal Library at the Tre Kronor Palace in Stockholm, and it stayed there for about 50 years, a curiosity for the Swedish court, until May 7th, 1697.
The day of the Great Fire.
A catastrophic fire broke out in the attic of the royal palace. It spread with terrifying speed. The whole palace was a wooden fire trap. The staff was scrambling to save the royal family and the most important treasures. They reached the library, and the room was already filling with smoke. The fire was right at the door.
Now, you have a book that takes two people to lift. You can't just tuck it under your arm and run down the stairs, especially if the stairs are on fire. What do?
You panic, and in that panic, you make a split-second decision. The window is open. The ground is 4 stories down.
No way.
Eyewitness accounts from the time all confirm it. To save the Codex Gigas from the flames, they threw it out the window.
They defenestrated the Devil's Bible.
They did! 165 pounds of parchment and wood free-falling 4 stories to the courtyard below.
Did it just explode on impact?
It hit the ground incredibly hard. The binding was damaged, the big wooden boards were likely smashed or at least loosened, and some of the leaves might have come loose. But the book itself, the text block, survived. However, there is a detail in the reports that is almost too wild to believe, but it's in the record.
Tell me.
It reportedly landed on a bystander.
You are kidding me.
Someone was standing below the window, and the sum of all medieval knowledge fell on them from the sky. The accounts say the person was badly injured. I mean, can you imagine the physics of that impact?
That's Looney Tunes logic, but it happened in real life.
Yeah.
But the book survived.
It survived the fire that destroyed most of the rest of the Royal Library. If they hadn't thrown it out that window, it would just be a pile of ash today.
And where is it today?
Today, it sits in the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm, in a building in Humlegården Park. It's in a climate-controlled, dimly lit treasury room. It's treated with the reverence of a holy relic. And millions of people have gone to see it. It has survived wars, fires, theft, bankruptcy, and time itself.
It's an absolutely incredible survival story. So let's bring all this together. We started with this idea of a spooky book, but what we actually have here is a monument.
It's a monument to the human need for order. Think about that monk, Herman. Think about the chaos of the Middle Ages. Plagues, famines, wars, constant uncertainty. In his cell, Herman tried to build a fortress against that chaos. He tried to trap the entire universe, God, history, medicine, and yes, even the devil in amber.
He wanted to ensure that if the world outside ended, if the bricks of his own mortality walled him in, that knowledge would survive.
And in a very real way, he succeeded. He sacrificed his life, 30 years of it, to create a backup drive for his entire civilization.
It really is the ultimate time capsule.
It is, and it kind of challenges us, I think. We live in an age of infinite, overwhelming information. We have the internet in our pockets, but it's also fragmented. It's so fleeting. Herman spent 30 years building something permanent, something whole.
So here's the question for you listening, and I want you to really think about this. If you had to pull a Herman, if you had to go into a room for 30 years and write one single book that contained everything you thought the future needed to know, what would go in it?
What would be in your great work? Would you include the history of your country, the best medical cures we have, the fundamental laws of physics?
And maybe more importantly, would you include your demons? Would you, like Herman, draw a portrait of the devil on page 577, just to be honest about the darkness that exists right alongside the light?
Because that might be the bravest thing about the Codex Gigas. It doesn't hide the darkness. It creates a space for it. It looks it right in the eye, and then it turns the page.
Something to think about while you're creating your own legacy. Just, maybe don't use donkey skin. We have the cloud for that now. Thanks for diving deep with us on the Codex Gigas.
A pleasure as always.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive. Stay curious.